Newcastle United drew 3-3 with Liverpool at St James's Park last night in what was one of the games of the season. The midfield was better, the pressing was better, the energy was better, the performance was much better. In this video I'm going to explain the keys to that and why I think it could be a springboard for going forward. Let's get into it. Hello and welcome back to another video on the channel. Welcome back to another Newcastle United analysis video as well. Before we get into it, as always, please like, share and subscribe to the videos on the channel. Please help me grow the channel because I've really got some big plans going into the new year. I want to do much more stuff away from Newcastle United but also with Newcastle United as well. I've got big plans for this channel. I'm hoping to really push it on, but I need your support. So please like this video because it helps it grow, but also subscribe as well. Can we get this video to 50 likes? That's been my aim. Can we get another video to 50 likes? That would be huge. So please, if you're watching this video, hit that like button, and if you haven't already, do subscribe. But we'll get straight into the video and what was a really good performance from Newcastle United yesterday. Fantastic, particularly in the first half. The energy levels were there, the pressing was there, and yes, there'll be a lot of talk, and rightly so, that Liverpool came to town. It was a big game against an elite side, and the top players stood up and were counted. And this is kind of like the sequel that I didn't want to make to the video that I made after the Crystal Palace game, where I really chastised the system and chastised Eddie Howe and kind of put the blame a little bit on those players as well for not turning up. And saying that the team was underachieving when they went to places like Crystal Palace, didn't have a shot on target, one shot in the whole game, 0.02 XG. But that was completely different in this game. And yes, you can say it's home under the lights, Liverpool are there, and there's very much a lot of difference in the air, and I fully understand that. But it does prove that this team is capable of much better. Sandro Tonali was phenomenal in midfield. He's going to be the crux of today's video. Bruno Guimaraes, 2 assists. Really enjoy playing in that advanced role, in that number 8 role, much more involved. Alexander Isak, really good in terms of coming short and linking the play. There was a lovely little pass for Jacob Murphy in the first half, just minutes before he opened the scoring with a fantastic, a lovely, powerful effort. 70 miles an hour that ball was hit, and he gave Virgil van Dijk a really, really tough evening all night. Anthony Gordon much more involved. Joe Linton was his busy, powerful best as well. Everyone played to their strengths in a system that works. And yes, Newcastle had less possession. Yes, they were able to rely on their counter press a bit more, like they were against Manchester City, like they were against Arsenal. I fully appreciate that. But I do think that this system and this game shows that it can be transferred into a possession-based game. I think, yes, there's still issues with unlocking a low block because there's no number 10. I've said that in the last couple of weeks. I think that is still an issue, but Bruno was much more effective higher up the pitch, so maybe that could be the answer. But the player I really want to focus on in terms of this is Sandro Tonali, because we've spoken a lot about how he links with Bruno and how he hasn't really made that position as number 6 his own. How Sean Longstaff has done that sort of dirty work a little bit more with Bruno in the number 6 role and him next to him, and sort of just allowing that midfield to sort of stay tight-knit. But it stayed tight-knit with Tonali at number 6 yesterday, and he was really, really good, effective at picking the ball up and calming Newcastle down in possession, but also getting high up the pitch and winning the ball high and leading that press in the same way that Bruno did 2 years ago. It really felt like a coming-of-age performance and another great example of how Bruno and Tonali can play in tandem. It isn't a Gerrard Lampard thing. If the system's right, it can work, and I think that that's been proven here. Slightly different to the way it was against PSG, when obviously it was Longstaff alongside the pair of them and that sort of tight-knit thing happened. But this happened with Tonali at number 6, and that's fantastic. As I say, he was very good at calming Newcastle down in possession. He would pick the ball up from Burn or Lewis Hall and instantly have a couple of yards of space, just reduce the tempo a little bit, add a little bit of calmness and play the ball. And he really helped Newcastle overpower Ryan Gravenberch in that midfield. I think Alexis McAllister had a couple of good moments in the first half, but he didn't really influence the game as well as he can do. And Newcastle were able to get on top of Liverpool in midfield, which has been a massive, massive issue all season for Newcastle, is that midfield battle. They've been losing that midfield battle far too often. They look compact, they looked good in pressing, they looked good at playing through teams as well, even if it was because they had more space and because they had less possession of the ball, they had more opportunities to turn the ball over. That is still true, but I think the same principles can be transferred into Saturday's game at Brentford and the leg game at Leicester, which is really the crucial game to see where they are, because that's a game where they'll have a lot of possession. That's a game where they'll have a lot of responsibility to take the ball and progress it. But Tonali was doing that himself, I thought, yesterday in a really, really effective way. And that shows that Newcastle can do that, especially if Bruno can get higher and link up with Isak, because Isak was dropping deep and Bruno was getting higher. There was very little space between the two of them, which was great, because that's where Newcastle struggled, as I mentioned in recent weeks. Isak was playing the ball into Gordon really well, and playing specifically the ball into Jacob Murphy in that first half, where Murphy had that shot as well. There was great link-up play, and this is all based off the lack of possession and the turnovers and everything. I fully understand that, as I say, but it is a blueprint for how it can work against teams with low blocks, and it is a blueprint for how Newcastle can play when they have to dominate the ball. They didn't do this against Crystal Palace, and it comes back to this mentality issue. 10 years ago, when Jose Mourinho was Chelsea manager and Chelsea came to St James's Park, lost 2-0 to Newcastle, who had been struggling at that point, he made the claim that Newcastle were a team that only turned up at the certain times when the TV cameras were there, when the atmosphere was right, when things were going well. They would turn up and become a really powerful, really dangerous team. And I think that was right about the mentality of that team then, and I think it's proving a little bit right about this team as well. Why is it that it takes Liverpool to come to town, and that pressure and that nervous energy that we've mentioned 2 years ago when they played Spurs at St James's Park and they overpowered them? That nervous energy of PSG last season, it really does help Newcastle, and there was a lot of that in the air last night, and it benefits. And why does it take that and the TV cameras and the big occasion to make Newcastle come out and play a bit more? I think that is a problem, and it deserves to be criticised, but at the same time you've got to be fair to Sandro Tonali and Bruno Guimaraes. They stepped up a bit more yesterday. Anthony Gordon showed that he can get on the ball a bit more as well. He really enjoys running at players. Obviously, he can't do that when it's a low block. That's why it's an issue for him. But he showed he can be effective as a creative force and connecting with Lewis Hall, who I'll get into Hall defensively in a minute, because I thought he started quite well. Obviously, had a difficult time in the second half. But in an attacking sense, it's great to not have to fear about the left-hand side anymore. The fullbacks do work quite well, I think, in an attacking way now, much better than they ever did even 2 years ago, when obviously Dan Burn was playing left back and it was more about defensive solidity, and Kieran Trippier would go forward on the right. Now I think the fact that the both of them go forward in tandem, it really works quite well going forward. Defensively, as I say, and I will talk about Liverpool in a second, because I think you've got to hand a lot of credit to Liverpool in that second half, the way that they came back into the game, particularly Mo Salah, who I think is the best player in the world at the moment. There is no denying that. There's lots of talk about his contract. Maybe that's fueling it, but it wasn't that he dominated the game. It wasn't that he took it by the scruff of the neck in a sort of obvious way. It was deft touches. It was little bits of intelligence. It was little things that you didn't notice, and then Liverpool were through. I think lots of people are talking about the brilliance of that third goal that Liverpool scored, and obviously that's very fair. That was a fantastic move. The little turn in the box from Salah, the finish, was a brilliant goal. But the goal I want to focus on, the goal that really made me sit up and take notice of Liverpool, was the first one, because Lewis Hall plays the ball into midfield. It's an innocuous pass, it's a risky pass, he misses it, that can happen. But as soon as that happens, Newcastle can do nothing about that attack. The ball is played to Salah, who plays it straight into Curtis Jones, who finishes it with the first touch, fantastic finish. But it's that one touch, it's that intelligence, and then the position for Salah as well, when he scored at the near post, was phenomenal too. I think Salah is... I think this is a second half where he picked up the game in a way that you didn't even notice. As I say, it was just those little deft touches, the movements, the intelligence of his play was just phenomenal, and he gave Newcastle a tough time in that second half. But Newcastle were equally, I think, the team that best put Liverpool back on the back foot more than any team I've seen in recent weeks in that first half. That connection between Tonali picking the ball up deep, finding Bruno, Joelinton working really well in that sort of battering ram roll. Finally, those three have combined in the way that we all hoped that they would. Have Alexander Isak dropping deep and and linking up, but also getting in behind. And obviously the goal came from that fantastic run and touch. He's very good at taking on players and finding space in tight areas as well, which really helped get the better of Liverpool's defence, particularly in that sort of earlier in the game. Newcastle, I think, did lose the ball a little bit too easily in that second half, and that allowed Liverpool a foothold into the game, and they obviously nearly won the game. Fabian Schär popping up at the end with the equaliser. Newcastle deserved a point. Liverpool, I think, on the balance of that second half also deserved a point. So the draw was fair, and it was a fantastic game. But also there are a couple of moments that we have to talk about. I think Virgil van Dijk was very lucky in that first half for that shove on Anthony Gordon. He made it look quite accidental, but he clearly, for me, knew what he was doing. The penalty, for me, again, it is a penalty, and the referee's call is a great thing. But I think in that scenario, it was a foul, so that should be a penalty in my opinion. It was disappointing at the end to see the whistle go. I will say that the whistle didn't go when Isak was through on goal. The whistle went sort of as Pope threw out, and it found one of the players, but and then the Liverpool players stopped as Isak progressed. But at the same time, the fact that there was no added time for the free kick and there was no added time for a VAR check means that shouldn't have happened in my opinion. Andy Madley had a difficult game, had a poor game. It was not a great game, and I think a lot of Liverpool fans are saying this as well. But overall, as I say, Newcastle played very well. Tonali, fantastic, high up the pitch, winning the ball, leading the press. But also, I think the thing that stood out for me was the fact that he would take the ball from Burn and take the ball from Hall and take the ball in that sort of lower area where Newcastle have been quite exposed and been quite accessible in terms of getting to the defence and getting a run on goal for opposition players. There was none of that from Tonali. He was really good in terms of keeping the midfield compact, but also calming everybody down and setting the tempo. And that is something that can happen when they go to Brentford on Saturday. It's something that can happen when they host Leicester. It's something that can happen when they have to dominate the ball. It was a brilliant game, but this can be a springboard. It needs to be a springboard. Eddie Howe should play into this. He should understand, I think, what's happened here. And I think the great thing is that the structure of that midfield is actually based around Tonali playing as the six. He needs to be a bit more consistent with this, and Newcastle needs to find a way of unlocking the game in different ways. Obviously, there is the context that it was the Liverpool game when they had the space. They do need to enforce themselves, and I said on the weekend's video that they struggle to enforce themselves, and when they do struggle, they can't find a way forward. Obviously, it worked well yesterday because they started really fast, and their energy and their pressing and their connection and the combinations were really good from the very start. Tonali starts as a lower 6 and Bruno starts as a higher 8. That can be the structure of the midfield, and Joe Linton, Longstaff, Willock, whoever comes in alongside that can complement that. That should be the structure, because on the evidence of this, that can progress the team, because you've got possession players in the two areas, higher up, lower up. And before, I think the problem for Eddie Howe previously has been when they've played together, both has done one or the other at the same time. There's been a bit too fluid. I think that was initially the idea. It hasn't worked. I think Bruno should be the higher player and Tonali should be the lower player. That for me would be the best way going forward, because on the evidence of last night, Tonali is very good at the crucial things that a number 6 does, keeping the things compact, setting the tempo, but also setting the press as well. He did that brilliantly, and that was a huge plus. This can be a springboard for Newcastle only if they get things right. They can progress this into a possession-based style. Fantastic game. Liverpool, I think, are still going to win the title. They were absolutely phenomenal in that second half after a really poor first half. Salah is absolutely brilliant as well at the moment. As I say, the way that he played, he didn't dominate the game in terms of being everywhere, but what he did do was create spaces with little passes, the intelligence of his positioning, the touches, the link-up play, those things. The fact that he was so devastating when he got the chances was just absolutely incredible, and you've got to hold your hands up to that. It's on to Brentford at the weekend. There's reinvigoration at Newcastle after that performance, but the problem is consistency. They have to be better in those games. They have to show that they can do it all the time, because until they do, there'll be a lot of people questioning why they can only do it against the likes of Arsenal, the likes of Manchester City, and the likes of Liverpool. That's been the theme of the season, and it needs to change. Thanks very much for joining me. Like, share and subscribe, as I said earlier. Lots of plans coming forward in the new year and over the next few weeks. Please continue to support the channel. I really appreciate it, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.